Hello everyone, welcome to this video. Here we are at the quarry and we are going to be taking a look at this self-miner truck that I developed with Sheppey 5 and making some fixes. Now this video actually comes from a comment that a user placed saying that I should add batteries. Now the point of a diesel electric engine is not to rely on more battery power, but rather to have a generator that can keep up with the demand of the system. So if we take a look here at the back, we have these two medium electric motors attached to the mineral drill. Now if I go in here and start up the system and turn the drill on, you'll see something interesting. The battery power drains immediately. If you see the electric, we're down to 20%. And what that does is it causes the mineral drill to slow down and it can no longer function properly. We're less than 10% and here it's going to stop soon. Both Sheppey 5 and myself are quite meticulous, so we want our creations to work and to be useful to everyone. So what I'm going to do is I am going to delete this current generator setup we have, and what we're going to be doing is adding a new generator in here. I've cleared the space out. You can see there is a lot of room now for a generator, even a large one. But before we get into that, what I want to do is show you something here. So this is a generator that was developed by Zainoa, one of the moderators on my Discord server. And what we'll be testing is whether this generator, and it uses a 3x3 motor, but it does have just one single generator node, granted with a ton of gearing. So this one single generator actually does put out a decent amount of power, but I want to get a gauge. I just want to get a feeler for how much power we actually need to go into these drills to make it work. And one other thing I did, you can see here, is I scrapped the medium motor system in favor of 6 or 7 small motors. So with this setup, I do feel there will be less power draw and we can maintain a high RPS coming out of the drills there. I'm going to fire up this, and there's a high output mode as well. So with that high output mode, we should be putting out extra power through the generator, and it is a decent amount. I mean, I honestly have to give it to Zainoa for developing such a small generator, such a powerful yet small generator. You can see here we're up to 120 and still climbing. Now if I hop into the cab of the truck and start up the drill, we can see the power draw here. So it isn't enough to keep up. You can see we're down to 80% electric and it's still dropping. So it's telling us that the 140 that we have now is not enough to keep this system charged up. If it was, it'd be quite simple. I'd just be deleting the Unicon box members like this and putting this generator into that void there. But because we need more power, I'm gonna have to develop something custom here. Over here we have the old trusty 2 modular engine and 2 generator system that I developed. This one uses my auto start generator that I have on the Steam workshop. If I go ahead and fire it up, and its throttle is 0.5 right now, you can see that we are at around 17 RPS for the motor, and each one of these has 250. So we're at a joined, call it 500 Stormworks watts, which should be enough for the truck. But we have a problem. This is much larger than what I can place in the truck, so I'm gonna have to likely have a 3x3 engine rather than 2 3x3 engines, or modular cylinders rather. So to not reinvent the wheel, because end of the day I'm just taking parts off the existing modular engine, I'm just going to go ahead and put the air intake on that side and that should allow me to delete this cylinder right here. Now the one thing we're missing is the fuel, which is attached to there. So for that fuel, I can, rather than placing it here, I'll just attach it to this manifold like that, just going up, doesn't matter, and we'll finish the piping. Now yes, it's not pretty right now, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what size and setup we have to have in order to have one single 3x3 motor. And a word of advice, as always, make sure to always put a gas relief valve on your tanks, otherwise it will pressurize, or rather depressurize, and it'll become kind of like a vacuum situation where your fuel can't run out. Okay, now what we have is in essence the one single cylinder. This is just the crankshaft, so we don't really need that, but just for the sake of what I'm trying to do, let us move that there just to keep it as compact as possible rather than having it kind of in the way. And the nice thing about this is it'll allow us to run some other tests with a clutch, because right now there is no clutch setup. It goes purely from the motor into these, and actually that may be problematic. It may stall the engine in essence, because what a clutch does is allow the engine to come up to RPS before we apply the load and stall it. Personally, with the two generators, I expect this to stall right away. Let's see. So we're using our starters. Alright, it's picked up. It doesn't seem to be stalling. It's hovering around 8 RPS, but we're only getting 66 watts out of each of these, so substantially less power. If I go ahead and just delete one of these, just to provide ourselves with a single unit, now we are at 15 RPS, and here we're at 232. So this is actually much more optimal than even the previous setup, because we were running at around 66 watts in each generator, giving us 132 watts. So here we have 100 more watts coming out of this setup. Now, we do have a gearbox, and we are running at 15 RPS, which isn't bad, but it's a little high. It'll make the engine prone to overheating, and not only that, I do think we can get more juice out of this generator. What I'm going to do is change the gearing on this gear, and what I'm going to do is allow us to have a max throttle of 1. If you haven't watched my gearing video, I do recommend you take a look, just because what you'll see there is how the gearing ratio plays a role at pushing power through systems. So in this case, we have 7 coming into the gearbox and 21 leaving it. Now in this instant, it's running at a lower RPM or RPS, and what you have is 111. Now if I give it more throttle, I've stalled the thing. So interesting enough, with this auto start generator, it may not even allow that level of throttle to be put into it without stalling. You can see it did play havoc. Now, one thing that I do have is another microcontroller that I can use. There are actually 2 new microcontrollers, so this one is fairly outdated. This one is what I used for this setup, but I do have another set of generators. I made a video with these generators, and I actually have modular engine generator 1.4. Now this is actually the one that is on the workshop. So first of all, this is the more up-to-date version, and that's just without even doing anything else, we can apply this setup. But there's something else, and that something else is the diesel electric generator. Now this is something that I developed for my trains, but you could see it actually has different interface. This one has battery level to start, throttle, max throttle when overheating, air fuel ratio. This one here has some different values and different elements in it. And what's very interesting is that this one actually has a clutch value. Now over here, we don't have a clutch value. Instead, what you do is you manually set your clutch to whatever you want, and you can leave it. Now, I do recommend you take a look at that other video, because the clutch value will play a role in this setup, and I'll show you an example first. So if we go back to this setup, you saw that having a value of 1 did not work, so we're just going to go back to a max value of 0.5. But one thing to keep in mind is in this instant, we had the engine put out whatever it can, and you first saw the RPS was like 15, and then it was a little lower, 11. Now, with this gearing ratio, if I go ahead and put a clutch in here, and set my set a throttle lever to the clutch, and set this value to there, what it's going to allow us to do is actually let the engine warm up and then turn on the generator. And by feathering the clutch, you can actually adjust the value that comes out of here. So right now you can see the engine is going like crazy, 60, and now if I give it 100% clutch, it gives us 120-ish, and it's kind of dropping, right? The engine's at 7 RPS. Now if I reduce this, it'll actually allow the engine to work at a higher RPS. So there is kind of a median or a fine balancing act where by putting a different throttle on the clutch, we can change the output on the generator. So it works by the RPS value entering the generator, and by kind of having a clutch, it allows the engine to not get bogged down, right? The engine is using this clutch and allowing us a higher RPS without stalling it, because if I apply the full clutch, the RPS will drop. Actually, this is really interesting. I put a flywheel and I changed the gearing a little bit, and now it actually allows me to have 16 RPS, which again is a little high. Hopefully the thing doesn't overheat. But what it does give me is over 360 watts coming out of this single generator. And that's with 86% throttle. Now if I give it 100% throttle, you could see that the RPS drops, and so does the production of power. So you definitely want something a little bit more in the middle. You can see we're at 700 with a 70% throttle, so maybe 80% clutch drops the RPS down around 20, and this gives us 500. This probably is enough for the truck to power up its drill. The one thing to keep in mind is if we have the 85% throttle on the clutch right off the bat, it does take a little bit more to start up, but it seems to start up right away, like just with a little bit more extra time. And here we are up to close to 400 power. Now to verify that this all works, first of all that it does provide enough juice for the drill, and not just that, to optimize the actual throttle and RPS coming through the system, because maybe we don't need the 20 RPS and maybe we don't need this high level of power. Maybe it's enough to have something a little slower, a little more fuel efficient, and something that ultimately gets the job done just the same way. So I'm going to run the drill and we can take a look here. So in this case we're actually draining power. Not very fast, but it is dropping. So what are we producing? 391. So 391 is not enough. If I drop this down, the RPS shoots up, and we're charging this. So we want something in between. If we slow down the throttle too much, I'll end up not being able to sustain this electric power. So right now we're at a 2 drill speed, which hopefully is enough, but we're not losing any electricity, and that's with 83% on this clutch. So I was able to find the number where this is actually charging it. You can see right now it's going up but ever so slightly, so this is on the cusp, just perfectly enough to allow this to run without using any excess fuel. So with a RPS of 17.5 and a clutch of 0.8435, we are able to run our drill consistently. So this, with this whole setup put into this truck, we'd end up with a pretty satisfactory result. And the most important number with all this setup is this. So this is the output that we need on this generator to be providing enough juice for this setup. So it's just over 400 here. So it seems that the number is just over 400. I could drop it down to 407 and it still is charging up the system. Now, as I said, I do have another microcontroller, the one for the diesel electric generator. And in this case, it does work a little bit differently because we actually have some factors that we don't need here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this whole microcontroller and start from scratch. So we do have our main throttle. We'll have our battery, which is fine. Engine starter, we have a couple of starters on this engine. RPS, and let's see, key start, air manifold up here, fuel manifold over here. Booster motor we don't have, that's if you have a little electric motor. Clutch is right there, and then we have an aux throttle and aux starter key. We don't need those. In fact, I can actually go right ahead and make the microcontroller a little shorter so it's easier to fit in the truck. And this setup now will put out a certain power into the generator. Now, the one thing that is different is that one allowed us to start off at 0.5, whereas this one has a max throttle of 1. So you could see it's an entirely different setup. It actually uses the throttle that we're putting into it as well as this throttle value. And I'm sure I could put this to 0.5 and 0.5 and then it's just going to stay there. And you can see also there is a generator clutch value right here. So that will help us by not having to have this throttle lever. We just have a generator value coming right out there. The last thing I have to do is connect the cylinder itself to this. And what I will do is allow a max throttle of 1. But we will start off at that previous level. Now you can see it's struggling to start up. So something isn't right here. And if I give it more throttle, it seems to be going. Alright, so with 100% throttle, and this clutch set to 0.84 like we had, we're producing over the 407 that we need at an expense of the RPS. So you can see at this instant we have too high of an RPS, which is not really necessary for us. We'd be quite happy with a smaller number to kind of balance out that system and make it not waste more fuel than we have to. So that will leave us with a throttle of maybe what we just did, 94% or so. So it seems to kind of be stabilized there, 408, with this 93.9%. And in this case, if I run the drill, it won't lose any electric power. So that's awesome. This seems to be going well. It is a little high, meaning I may need this to drop down to like 0.93 rather than 0.94. I'm pretty happy with this setup now. Everything seems to be working right, and the best part is because this microcontroller has these minimum and maximum values here, I don't even need to have a throttle lever at all, and I don't need a clutch lever. And this button here, the key button, will actually just be the drilling button. So the button inside the truck, when I go to start the drill on the display, that's what's going to fire this setup up. So if I'm not drilling, it won't be using any gas, it won't be producing any electricity. So now we gotta shove this thing into the truck itself. Some of these other things can come in a little later. For now, let's just start with the base engine, flywheel, and pretty much general setup. See if we have, first of all, the height and the size. Perfect, alright. Good start. I can put this all the way up to this wall here. Now I do need some extra starters on this thing, and 2 is not enough. In this case I actually had 3 more, but maybe I can make do with the 2. Now it's going to be quite cramped in here just because of this size of everything, but we'll see what we can do. Previously I actually had this fan on the roof here of the truck, but what I can do is put the bigger fan that we had here, and while it will take up more space, it will also be functional for cooling this engine. So if I just do that, it now gives me a nice spot to put my piping like this and this. And then, of course, the engine will be beneath. Everything is being plugged in to the main power. This one is actually running whenever the drilling system is active. And that means we can delete this. Now, likewise, the pump will also want to be running when the drilling system is active. And I do have to put the pump to push the coolant through that engine. Here I had access to both sides of the engine, and I had these manifolds and things, but in this instant I only have access to one side of the engine, so I have to make sure to maximize my reach. And funny enough, this one's actually blocked by this cooling radiator, so the top one can't even be used without blocking something. What I of course can do is move out these blocks, the piping, and separate it a little further, and that'll actually allow me to do something very cool here that will be needed for the cooling system especially. So you can see now, with that going there, we can actually put our cooling manifold directly on this spot like that and have it go up into there, and then all we need is a pump to push that through this and here. I guess I didn't have to move it in both spots like that, but regardless, that combined with this being on and giving everything electric will be enough to cool the engine, hopefully. Of course, for the fuel, we're going to piggyback right out of the truck's own fuel tanks. There's no need to reinvent the wheel or have 2 separate systems. We can simply just take the existing. And the neat thing with that is I can actually push it here under this and make it go directly to this manifold. Now, we are running out of space, so I'm going to have to start putting some T manifolds like this to give us a little bit more room for the things we need. Before I get too invested in the piping, I want to make sure that the rest of this stuff fits. So we do need to have these 3 things coming out of the flywheel. And of course, once we have the clutch, we can rotate this. See that we don't need, or at least we don't need it there. So I have to now do some rejigging of this stuff and make sure that I can actually fit this large thing in here as well. So inside the space it fits. That's at least one good thing, but it fits right beneath this. Now we have to have a 3 length setup, and yet here we have only one gap or one space. So what I'm going to do though is just play with this piping. We're probably smartest to go down, and then we can go up and then back around, just to make sure we can actually fit the clutch and all this other stuff. So the first thing we had is the gear. The gear can actually go right now, and you can see the arrows face into the engine. So dropping it there and placing it towards the engine like this. And then I just need to have that clutch. And the clutch takes up 2 spaces. And currently we're only giving us 1 space there. So this isn't optimal. The nice thing, the floor allowed me to actually put piping beneath it like this. And now we have the clutch going up into the generator. Now, because I just put a new clutch, I have to make sure that everything goes to the right spot. You can see even the electric wasn't in the right spot. But once these 2 things are plugged in, and once this value is going to the new clutch there, we could delete it. Now, the generator itself, it doesn't even have any output. But what we do know is we have to put it to plug it into our grid. Otherwise, we're not really doing anything. And rather than plugging it into the truck's power grid, I'm actually going to only plug the generator into the drills themselves. And not only the drills, the actual breaker that powers the drills. So we don't need it to be plugged into this at all. To copy this, I actually did put 2 exhaust manifolds, and you'll find them pretty much feeding into the same system as what I had in for the truck itself, which is going to be really nice. And the air will go there. So in here you'll see the piping. This one goes into this smokestack, and this one goes into this smokestack. So we're using the truck smokestacks for this generator. I just plugged in this to the fuel line and gave it an air filter. The last thing needed is to move the actual microcontroller into the truck itself. And this old start key, I just had to find out where the microcontroller is that turns on the drill. Seems to be right there. So this one will go into the start key there, and now that's pretty much everything needed on the truck itself. Alright, let's test it out. If we turn the drill on, it's dropping, and it should start raising itself anytime soon here. You see the generator drill output is hitting 400, and that should be enough to start to bring this value up. Nice. Alright, so that gives us now a rising value. This is 1.86. I'm curious to see if that is enough to drill 4 minerals, but that is awesome. Alright, at the mine, if I make my way into this new drill truck, let's take a look at where we can find some minerals. They should be on the walls there, and they should also be on the ground. There we go. So we will stop with the back end more or less over top of the minerals right there, and we could put it in park, turn the drill on, and you see that it's not really dropped yet. So inside this we can press drill down. And now we're collecting minerals. We're at 15, we're 15, 16, 17. It's alright. The coal's coming in. And that's at a speed of 1.13. But the electricity is rising. And obviously the shaft speed slowed down because we actually are putting force on it here as it drills. But it is able now to actually sustain itself. So this is actually a very, very good thing. Previously, it wouldn't even be able to do this. So this is now a working creation, fixed up, a little different with these motors. But you could see that in here, we are in business, folks. So there you have it. The truck is working. Things are under control. This will be uploaded to the workshop as soon as I'm done this video here. I do want to thank each and every one of you for watching, and I want to especially thank my supporters. I'm talking about my YouTube members and my Discord server boosters. They give the extra support to make things properly running and to ensure that content and creations keep on flowing. So thank you very much, and hopefully this video is entertaining. Stay tuned for next video and for more creations, and until then, happy Stormworksing, everyone.